The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, though time meant little in the vastness of space. Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee in the observation deck when Lieutenant Sophie Grant burst through the door, her tablet clutched in both hands and her face drained of color. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Jake set down his mug and took the tablet. The message was marked with the highest priority codes, sent directly from Earth Command and originating from somewhere in the Outer Rim territories. As he read, his jaw tightened. The Thanari coalition was dying. Not slowly, not peacefully, but burning world by world under the assault of the Krath Empire. 14 colonies had already fallen in the past 3 months. The message included video feeds that Jake wished he could unsee. Cities reduced to rubble. Populations herded like cattle. The Krath were efficient in their brutality, taking what they wanted and destroying everything else. Jake had been in the Earth Defense Force for 12 years, but humanity had only known about aliens for 8 of those years. When the Galactic Council made first contact, everyone on Earth thought it would change everything. In some ways it had. Humans learned they were not alone. They learned that thousands of species had been traveling the stars for millennia. They learned that Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the most dangerous planets known to produce intelligent life. Most species in the galaxy came from gentle worlds. Planets with stable climates, abundant resources, and few natural predators. They had evolved in paradise compared to Earth. No ice ages, no supervolcanoes, no mass extinctions every few million years. They built their civilizations on cooperation and trade because they never needed to fight for survival the way humans did. The Thanari were a perfect example. They were a peaceful species, incapable of violence by their very nature. Their biology simply did not allow for the kind of aggression needed for warfare. They had no military, no weapons, no concept of organized combat. For 10,000 years they had lived in peace, trading with other species and building beautiful cities on their colony worlds. Then the Krath arrived. The Krath Empire was different from most galactic species. They came from a heavy gravity world with harsh conditions, though nothing compared to Earth. They had built their culture around strength and conquest. For centuries they had been contained by council sanctions and diplomatic pressure. But 3 months ago, they had decided they were done following the council's rules. Jake scrolled through the diplomatic files attached to the message. The Galactic Council had tried everything in their playbook. Economic sanctions that the Krath ignored, trade embargoes that meant nothing to an empire built on taking what it wanted, diplomatic protests that the Krath commanders laughed at openly. The Council had even sent a fleet of peacekeeping vessels to establish a neutral zone. The Krath destroyed them in less than an hour. The problem was simple. The Galactic Council had spent thousands of years building a civilization based on the idea that everyone could be reasoned with. That violence was always the wrong answer. That any conflict could be resolved through discussion and compromise. It worked wonderfully when everyone involved came from peaceful worlds where survival had never required fighting. But the Krath did not care about discussions. They cared about power, and now the Thanari were paying the price. Jake reached the end of the message and found the part that made his blood run hot and cold at the same time. It was a direct petition from Ambassador Velrix, the Thanari representative to the Galactic Council. The words were simple and desperate. "We petition the human species for assistance. We know the Council has warned us about your kind. They say you come from a world of fire and fury. They say your people have survived conditions that would kill any of us within minutes. They say you are dangerous, unpredictable, and violent. We do not care. We are dying, and no one else will help us, please. We have nothing to offer but our gratitude and our hope. Please help us." Jake handed the tablet back to Sophie. "Get Captain Brooks on the line, now." Within the hour, the entire crew of the UNS Valiant was assembled in the main briefing room. The Valiant was one of humanity's newest deep space vessels, built after humans had reverse-engineered some of the technology the Council had shared. It carried a crew of 300, along with a complement of Marines and fighter pilots. By galactic standards, it was a small ship. By human standards, it was a miracle of engineering. Captain Helen Brooks stood at the front of the room, her gray eyes scanning the faces of her crew. She had served in 3 different navies before joining the Earth Defense Force, and her reputation was legendary. She did not waste time with speeches. "You have all seen the message," she said. "The Thanari are asking for our help. Earth Command is debating what to do. The Council is warning us not to get involved. They say it will destabilize the region. They say humanity is too new to galactic politics to understand the consequences. They say we should let the diplomatic process work. She paused, and Jake could see the anger in her eyes. The diplomatic process has been working for 3 months. 14 worlds have burned while the Council talks. Millions are dead. Millions more are enslaved. And the Krath are not stopping. Helen pulled up a holographic display showing the outer rim. Red markers indicated fallen Thanari colonies. Yellow markers showed worlds currently under attack. There were a lot of yellow markers. Admiral Cole has sent a message to all Earth Defense Force vessels in this sector. Helen continued. He is asking for volunteers. Anyone who wants to help the Thanari can join the fleet he is assembling. Anyone who wants to sit this out can return to Earth with no questions asked and no judgment. The room was silent for a moment. Then Lieutenant Danny Shaw stood up from his seat at the weapons station. With respect, Captain, where else would we go? Those people asked for help. That is good enough for me. One by one, every single person in the room stood. Jake felt a surge of pride. This was why he had joined the Defense Force, not to explore strange new worlds or seek out new civilizations, but to stand up when someone needed help. Helen nodded slowly, and Jake could see she was fighting to keep her emotions in check. All right then. We rendezvous with Admiral Cole at the edge of Thanari space in 48 hours. Engineering? I want every system running at peak efficiency. Weapons? I want every railgun calibrated and every missile armed. Medical, prepare for casualties. All hands, battle stations in 30 minutes. We have a long trip ahead of us. As the crew filed out to their stations, Jake stayed behind with Helen and Sophie. The three of them looked at the holographic display, watching the red markers that represented destroyed worlds. The Krath have 47 ships in the Thanari system, Sophie said quietly. Admiral Cole is gathering 12 human vessels. We will be outnumbered 4-1. Then it will be a fair fight, Jake said with a grim smile. Helen looked at him. The Council species think we are dangerous. They think we are violent primitives who barely deserve a seat at the table. They are afraid of us. They should be, Jake replied, but not because we are violent. They should be afraid because we are willing to do what they will not. Someone has to stand between innocent people and monsters. Might as well be the species that has been fighting monsters since we lived in caves. 2 days later, 12 human vessels gathered at the edge of Thanari space. The UNS Valiant was the smallest. The UNS Defiant, Admiral Cole's heavy cruiser, was the largest. In between were destroyers, frigates, and support ships. It was not a large fleet by galactic standards, but it was crewed by Deathworlders, and that made all the difference. Admiral Cole's message came through on all channels, his voice calm and steady. All ships, this is Defiant Actual. The Thanari asked for our help, and we are going to give it to them. The Council says we should not get involved. They say violence is not the answer. Maybe they are right. But sometimes the only thing that stops a bully is someone willing to punch back. We are going to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do. Individual captains have full tactical authority. Fight smart, fight dirty, fight to win. Let us go to work. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving streaks of blue light in the darkness of space. Behind them, Earth continued spinning, unaware that its children were about to change the galaxy forever. In the Thanari home system, the Krath continued their conquest, confident that no one would stop them. They had never encountered humanity before. They had never fought someone from a death world. They were about to learn what happened when you picked a fight with a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to survive the unsurvivable. The message had been sent, the plea had been heard, and now the Deathworlders were coming. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, watching another Thanari city burn on the planet below. Smoke rose in thick columns from what had once been a manufacturing center. His troops were already loading the resources onto cargo vessels. The Thanari civilians had been rounded up and sorted. The useful ones would work in the mines. The rest did not matter. He clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. This was the 18th world his fleet had conquered in the past 3 months. The Thanari were pathetically easy to defeat. They had no weapons, no defenses, no will to fight. They simply surrendered and begged for mercy. It made the conquest boring but profitable. The Galactic Council had sent their usual complaints. Economic sanctions that meant nothing to an empire that took what it needed. Diplomatic protests that Zethkar deleted without reading. They had even sent a peacekeeping fleet once. His warriors had torn through those ships like paper. The council species were weak, bred soft by 10,000 years of peace, Commander. We are detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of the system, his sensor operator called out, interrupting his thoughts. Zethkar turned his massive form toward the display. His species stood 8 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and a natural armored carapace that could stop most small arms fire. He had been bred for war, as had every Krath for generations. Strength was everything in their culture. "Show me," he ordered. The display shifted to show 12 vessels emerging from faster-than-light travel. The designs were unfamiliar, blocky and inelegant compared to the smooth curves of council ships. Zethkar accessed the database with a thought. The transponder codes identified them as human vessels. Humans, he had heard of them. A new species, barely 8 years in the galactic community. The Council had classified their homeworld as a Class 12 Deathworld, whatever that meant. Zethkar had skimmed the report once. Apparently they came from a planet with harsh conditions. It did not impress him. The Krath homeworld was a heavy gravity planet with extreme temperatures. They had conquered it through strength as they conquered everything. "They are hailing us, Commander," the communications officer said. "Ignore them. If they interfere, destroy them. Relay that order to the fleet." Zethkar dismissed the human ships from his mind, 12 vessels against his 47. The humans would see they were outmatched and leave, or they would die. Either way, it did not concern him. On the bridge of the UNS Valiant, Jake Morrison studied the tactical display with a growing sense of urgency. The Krath fleet was spread across the system in 3 main groups. The largest concentration, 25 ships, orbited the Thanari homeworld. Another 15 were stationed at the resource processing stations in the asteroid belt. The remaining 7 were escorting cargo vessels loaded with stolen goods. "They are not even responding to our hails," Sophie said from her console. Her fingers moved across the controls, gathering data on the Krath ships. "Their vessels are larger than ours. Their weapons output higher. Their shields stronger in raw power. But are they faster?" Captain Helen Brooks asked. Sophie checked her readings. "No, ma'am. We have a significant advantage in acceleration and maneuverability. Their ships are built like tanks. Ours are built like fighters," Helen nodded slowly. She had been studying everything humanity knew about the Krath, which was not much. They were warriors, confident in their strength. They used brute force tactics, overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower. It worked well against council species who had no real military tradition. But humans had been fighting wars since before they discovered fire. Every major civilization on Earth had military history stretching back thousands of years. Humanity had refined warfare into an art form, born from necessity on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. "Admiral Cole is signaling," the communications officer announced. "All ships are to hold position and await orders." The 12 human vessels formed a loose formation at the edge of the system. Besides the Valiant, there was the UNS Defiant, Admiral Cole's heavy cruiser. The UNS Resolute, commanded by Captain Peter Hoffman. The UNS Hurricane under Captain Lisa Monroe. The UNS Lightning, UNS Thunder, UNS Storm, and 5 other vessels ranging from destroyers to frigates. 300 crew members per ship on average. Less than 4,000 humans total, against over 15,000 Krath warriors. Jake pulled up the personnel files, reviewing the people who would be fighting in the coming battle. Lieutenant Danny Shaw on weapons, a former competitive shooter who could put a railgun round through a target the size of a dinner plate from 2,000 kilometers away. Lieutenant Amy Rogers leading the fighter wing, who had grown up flying rescue helicopters in mountain ranges where one mistake meant death. Sergeant Kyle Peterson commanding the Marine Detachment, a veteran of 3 different Earth conflicts who had trained in jungles, deserts, and Arctic conditions. Every single person on these ships had been forged by Earth. They had evolved on a planet with weather that could kill, animals that hunted humans, diseases that swept through populations, and natural disasters that destroyed cities. They had not just survived. They had thrived. They had built civilizations, created art, developed science, and reached for the stars, and now they were here to show the galaxy what that meant. Admiral Cole's face appeared on the main display. He was 60 years old, his face weathered by decades of service. He had commanded ships in the old Earth navies before the Defense Force existed. He had fought pirates in the South China Sea, run blockades in the Mediterranean, and patrolled the Arctic ice. He knew war in a way that no Krath commander could understand. "All ships, this is Defiant Actual," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I am uploading tactical parameters now. Study them." The Krath fight with brute force. They rely on their superior size and firepower. They move in predictable formations and follow standard military doctrine. They have never fought an enemy like us. The tactical data appeared on Jake's console. He studied it quickly, seeing the plan take shape. It was aggressive, risky, and completely insane by Galactic standards. It was also brilliant. "We are going to break every rule of engagement the Council uses," Admiral Cole continued. "We are going to fight dirty. We are going to use tactics that will horrify the peaceful species watching this. We are going to show the Krath what it means to fight Deathworlders. Individual captains have full tactical authority. Trust your crews, trust your training, and remember why we are here." The Thanari asked for help. "We are going to give it to them." Helen turned to her crew. "You heard the Admiral. Battle stations. This is not a drill. In approximately 30 minutes, we are going to engage an enemy force 4 times our size. We are going to win. Not because we have better ships or more powerful weapons, but because we are human. And humans do not quit." Jake moved to his station, checking systems and coordinating with the other department heads. Around him, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. There was no panic, no fear, just determination. Sophie pulled up a communication intercept from the Krath fleet. "They are laughing at us," she said quietly. "They think we are going to run away." "Let them laugh," Jake replied. "They will not be laughing for long." The human fleet began moving forward, accelerating into the system. On the Crimson Talon, Zethkar watched with growing annoyance as the human ships approached. Did they not understand they were outmatched? Were they that stupid or that arrogant? "All ships, combat formation," he ordered. "Prepare to engage. We will teach these Deathworlders a lesson about challenging the Krath Empire." His fleet moved into a standard wall formation, maximizing their firing arcs and overlapping their shields. It was the same formation they had used for centuries. It had never failed them, but they had never fought humans before. The human fleet suddenly broke apart, each ship accelerating on a different vector. The UNS Hurricane shot forward at maximum thrust, heading directly toward the Krath line. The UNS Lightning and Thunder split left and right. The Valiant and Resolute dove below the orbital plane. The remaining ships scattered in seemingly random directions. Zethkar stared at the display in confusion. What kind of military force abandoned formation before battle? Where was their command structure? Their coordination? This was chaos, not tactics. "Target the lead ship," he ordered. "Concentrate all fire." The Krath fleet locked weapons on the Hurricane. 25 warships prepared to fire on a single human vessel. It should have been suicide for the Hurricane to charge in alone. Captain Lisa Monroe should have broken off, called for support, or at least tried to evade. Instead, she pushed her engines to maximum burn and aimed straight for the heart of the Krath formation. On the Hurricane's bridge, Captain Monroe felt the acceleration press her into her seat. 20 gravities of thrust. Most species would have been crushed by the pressure. Humans merely gritted their teeth and endured. They had evolved running down prey across the African savanna, their bodies designed for endurance that no other species could match. "Weapons hot," her tactical officer called out. "Firing solution locked. Fire everything," Monroe ordered. The Hurricane's railguns opened up at point-blank range, accelerating metal slugs to a fraction of light speed. At this distance, the Krath shields barely mattered. The battle had been raging for 2 hours, and the Krath were learning a painful lesson about underestimating Deathworlders. Commander Zethkar had regrouped his remaining fleet into a defensive sphere around the Thanari homeworld, using the planet and its population as a shield. It was a tactic that had worked against every Council species. No civilized race would risk civilian casualties, but he was beginning to suspect that humans defined civilization differently. On the bridge of the UNS Valiant, Jake Morrison coordinated the fighter wing as they prepared for their first deployment. 30 small craft sat in the launch bays, each one carrying a pilot who had volunteered for what everyone knew was the most dangerous job in the fleet. Fighter pilots did not have heavy armor or powerful shields. They had speed, maneuverability, and reflexes honed by evolution on a death world. Lieutenant Amy Rogers ran through her pre-flight checklist one last time. She had grown up in the Rocky Mountains, learning to fly helicopters through narrow canyons where one mistake meant death. She had rescued dozens of people from situations that seemed impossible. Flying a fighter in space was not that different, she told herself. Just 3 dimensions instead of 2, and the penalty for failure was the same. All fighters, this is Valiant Actual. Captain Helen Brooks's voice came through the comm. You are cleared for launch. Your target is the Krath fighter screen. Break through it and clear a path for our bombers. Stay sharp and stay alive. Good hunting. Amy felt her fighter drop from the launch bay into the black void of space. Around her, 29 other fighters formed up in loose groups of 3. The Krath had deployed over 100 fighters of their own, sleek craft that moved in perfect mathematical formations. All wings, this is Rogers, Amy said into her comm. Remember your training. They fly like computers. We fly like humans, use that. Break and attack. The 2 fighter groups met halfway between the fleets and the space between them erupted with weapons fire. The Krath fighters moved with precision, their formations designed to maximize firing solutions through complex mathematics. Every movement was calculated. Every shot was planned. The human pilots flew like maniacs. Amy threw her fighter into a spin that would have made any flight instructor on Earth scream in horror. A Krath fighter's plasma bolt passed through the space where she had been half a second ago. She straightened out, locked onto her target, and fired a burst from her railguns. The Krath fighter's shields absorbed most of the impact, but the kinetic force knocked it off course. Amy's wingman, Lieutenant Chris Bailey, finished it off with a missile. Splash 1, Chris called out cheerfully. Around them, the dogfight descended into chaos. The Krath pilots could not understand what they were fighting. The humans did not follow any recognizable patterns. They used random vectors, unexpected rolls, and aggressive close-range tactics that bordered on insane. 3 human fighters went down in the first 5 minutes, but they took 9 Krath fighters with them. The difference was simple. Krath pilots trained in simulators, learning textbook maneuvers and optimal strategies. Human pilots trained on Earth where the atmosphere could kill you. The weather could change in seconds and gravity punished every mistake. They did not fly by the book because Earth had taught them that survival meant adapting, improvising, and sometimes just refusing to die. Lieutenant Joey Martinez pulled his fighter into a dive that brought him dangerously close to the Thanari planet's atmosphere. 2 Krath fighters followed, confident they could box him in. Joey waited until the last possible second, then pulled up hard. The G-forces threatened to black him out, but he had trained for this. Human bodies were designed for endurance. His vision grayed at the edges but never faded completely. 1 Krath fighter managed to follow him. The other one did not pull up in time and burned up in the atmosphere. That's one way to do it, Joey muttered, then spun around and fired on his remaining pursuer. While the fighters battled, the main fleet pressed its attack. The UN's Defiant demonstrated why humanity had designed it as a heavy cruiser. Admiral Cole brought his ship directly into the thickest part of the Krath formation and simply absorbed the damage. Plasma bolts and particle beams hammered against the Defiant's shields, draining them slowly but not breaking them. The Krath concentrated their fire, certain they could overwhelm even a Deathworlder ship with enough firepower. But the Defiant's shields had been designed for something much worse than weapons fire. They had been built to withstand solar radiation at close range, micrometeorite impacts at relativistic speeds, and the gravitational stresses of gas giant maneuvers. The engineers who designed them had not been thinking about warfare. They had been thinking about exploring a universe that wanted to kill you. While the Krath pounded uselessly on the Defiant, the other human ships tore through their flanks. The UNS Thunder and Lightning worked together, one ship drawing fire while the other struck from an unexpected angle. The UNS Resolute used the debris from destroyed Krath ships as cover, emerging only to fire and then disappearing again. The UNS Hurricane executed another of Captain Monroe's insane maneuvers, this time using the planet's gravity well to slingshot around and hit the Krath from behind. On the Valiant, Sophie Grant tracked the overall battle with growing satisfaction. We have destroyed 21 enemy vessels, she reported. 14 more are heavily damaged. Our fleet has taken hits, but all ships remain combat effective. Jake studied the tactical display. The Krath were tough and their ships were powerful, but they fought with brute force and predictable tactics. They had never needed to be creative because their superior strength had always been enough. Humans had been the weaker species for most of their evolution. They were not the fastest runners, the strongest fighters, or the most deadly predators on Earth. They had survived through intelligence, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to give up. They learned to hunt animals 10 times their size by working together. They learned to outlast anything else on the planet through sheer endurance. They learned to use tools, strategy, and creativity to overcome every obstacle. And now they were using all of that against an enemy who only knew how to rely on strength. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Krath flagship," the communications officer announced. Helen raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." Commander Zethkar's face appeared on the display. He looked different now, his confidence replaced by something that might have been respect or fear. "Human Commander, I propose a ceasefire. We can negotiate terms. You want to negotiate?" Helen asked, her voice cold. "Where were the negotiations when you burned Thanari cities? Where were the terms when you enslaved their populations? You had your chance to stop this before we arrived. You chose not to take it." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in agitation. "You cannot defeat my entire fleet. I still have more ships than you." "That's true," Helen admitted. "But here is what you need to understand about Deathworlders. We are not like the Council species. We did not evolve in paradise. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. Predators hunted us. Diseases killed us. The weather froze us or burned us. Earthquakes destroyed our homes. Volcanoes buried our cities. And we survived all of it. We survived by being tougher, meaner, and more stubborn than anything else on our planet." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "So yes, you have more ships. You might even destroy some of ours before this is over. But we will keep coming. We will keep fighting, because that is what humans do. We do not quit. We do not surrender. And we do not let bullies hurt innocent people. Now get off my comm channel before I decide to ram my ship down your throat." The transmission cut off. Around the bridge, several crew members allowed themselves small smiles. "Do you think he will retreat?" Sophie asked. "No," Jake said. "His pride will not let him. The Krath built their entire culture on strength. If he retreats from a smaller force, he will lose everything. He will fight to the end." Helen nodded in agreement. "Then we finish this. All ships prepare for final assault. Launch all bombers. I want that flagship disabled. No more warnings, no more mercy. They chose this fight. We are going to end it." The human fleet regrouped, damaged but not broken. The fighter screen had been cleared, losing 6 fighters but destroying 37 Krath craft in the process. Now the bombers launched, heavy craft loaded with missiles and torpedoes. They moved in under the cover of the main fleet's guns, targeting the most damaged Krath ships first. The UNS Valiant fired a spread of railgun rounds that punched through a Krath destroyer's failing shields. The ship broke apart, its ammunition stores detonating in a brilliant flash. The UNS Storm followed up by crippling a cruiser with a precise missile strike to its engine section. All across the battlefield, human ships pressed their advantage. Commander Zethkar watched his fleet crumble. He had started this battle with 47 ships. He was down to 19 operational vessels, and more were being damaged every minute. His warriors were the finest the Krath Empire could produce, but they were being beaten by a force a quarter their size. How was this possible? The humans were smaller, their ships were newer, their species was barely in space. They should not be winning, but they were winning because they understood something the Krath had forgotten. The ceasefire had held for exactly 47 minutes when the situation changed. Jake Morrison was reviewing damage reports in the Valiant's command center when the alert came through. 3 Krath ships had broken away from the retreating fleet and were accelerating toward the edge of the system at maximum speed. "Captain, the Krath are running," Sophie reported, pulling up their trajectory on the main display. "Those 3 ships are loaded with Thanari prisoners and stolen resources. They are trying to escape while we regroup." Helen Brooks studied the display with cold eyes. The 3 ships were making a run for the jump point that would let them escape to faster-than-light travel. Once they jumped, tracking them would be nearly impossible. The prisoners on those ships would be lost forever, sold to slave markets in the outer territories where even the Council's reach did not extend. "How long until they reach the jump point?" Helen asked. 19 minutes at their current speed, Sophie replied. Helen made her decision in seconds. "Navigation, plot an intercept course. Engineering. I need every bit of speed you can give me. Communications, inform Admiral Cole we are pursuing." The Valiant broke formation and accelerated hard, chasing after the fleeing Krath vessels. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Bobby Turner pushed the reactors to their limits, coaxing out every last bit of thrust. The ship shuddered as it hit speeds it was never designed to sustain for long periods. "We are gaining on them," Jake reported from his station, "but not fast enough. They will reach the jump point with 2 minutes to spare." Helen's jaw tightened. 2 minutes might as well be 2 hours in a chase like this. Once those ships jumped, the prisoners were gone. She looked at the weapons display. The Valiant's railguns had the range to hit the Krath ships from here, but at this distance and speed, the chances of a clean hit were minimal. More importantly, any hit might damage the cargo holds where the prisoners were being kept. "Get me a communication channel to those ships," Helen ordered. A moment later, she was looking at a Krath officer on her display. Unlike Commander Zethkar, this one showed no respect, only contempt. "Human, do not interfere. These prizes are ours by right of conquest. Your ceasefire was with Commander Zethkar, not with us. We follow our own path." "Those are not prizes," Helen said quietly. "Those are people. Living beings with families and lives. Let them go and you can leave in peace." The Krath officer laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "Weak. Your species is soft like all the others. You win one battle and think you can dictate terms. We will be gone in minutes and there is nothing you can do to stop us." The transmission cut off. Around the bridge, the crew looked to their captain, waiting for orders. Helen stood silently for a moment, thinking through the options. The Valiant could not catch the Krath ships before they jumped. They could not shoot them without risking the prisoners. By all logical analysis, those people were lost. But humans had not become the dominant species on Earth by accepting what logic told them was impossible. "Jake, get me Sergeant Peterson," Helen said, "and someone find me the craziest pilot we have still breathing." 5 minutes later, Jake was explaining the plan to a group of people who all thought their captain had lost her mind. Sergeant Kyle Peterson stood in the briefing room with 5 of his best Marines. Lieutenant Amy Rogers was there, still in her flight suit from the fighter battle. And standing beside them was Lieutenant Marcus Webb, who had earned his reputation by flying rescue missions in conditions that grounded everyone else. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Kyle said slowly. "You want us to catch up to a ship moving at full combat speed, match velocity, cut through their hull, fight our way to the cargo hold, rescue the prisoners, and get out before they jump to light speed. Do I have that right?" "That is correct," Jake confirmed. "We are going to die," Kyle said flatly. "Probably," Jake agreed. "But if we do nothing, those people definitely die." Or worse, Kyle looked at his Marines. They looked back at him. Then Corporal Nina Fletcher stepped forward. She was barely 5 feet tall, but she had survived 2 tours in some of the worst combat zones Earth had ever seen. "I did not come all this way to let some overgrown bugs kidnap innocent people," she said. "I am in." One by one, the rest of the Marines nodded. Amy checked her flight systems and grinned. "I can get you there. Staying alive afterward is your problem." Marcus studied the specifications of the Krath ship they would be targeting. "The Valiant cannot catch them, but my assault shuttle can. Barely. I will need to strip everything non-essential and run the engines past their safety limits. If something goes wrong, we will not have life support for long." "Then do not let something go wrong," Helen said, entering the briefing room. She looked at each person in turn. "I will not order you to do this. It is volunteer only. The risks are extreme and the chances of success are low. But those people on that ship asked the galaxy for help and the galaxy ignored them," we answered. "I will not abandon them now just because it is difficult." Kyle hefted his rifle and checked the power pack. "Ma'am, with respect, you are not getting rid of us that easy. My team and I signed up to protect people who cannot protect themselves. That does not stop just because the odds are bad." 15 minutes later, the assault shuttle dropped from the Valiant's bay. It was a small craft, designed to carry troops to and from combat zones. Marcus had stripped out everything unnecessary, including most of the armor plating and half the life support systems. What remained was essentially an engine with seats. "Hold on to something," Marcus said calmly, then engaged the main thrusters. The acceleration pressed everyone back into their seats. Normal shuttle operations topped out at 5 gravities. Marcus pushed it to 12. The hull groaned in protest. Warning alarms blared. The structural integrity monitor flashed red. Marcus ignored all of it and pushed harder. In the cargo hold, Kyle and his team checked their equipment one last time. They wore light armor, carried automatic rifles modified for ship combat, and each had enough ammunition for exactly 1 sustained firefight. They also carried plasma cutters for breaching the hull and medical supplies for the prisoners. 2 minutes to intercept, Marcus called back. Hope you all said your prayers. The shuttle screamed through space, closing the gap with the fleeing Krath ship. The Krath must have detected them because the ship began evasive maneuvers, trying to shake the pursuing shuttle. But Marcus had flown through hurricanes, dust storms, and the worst weather Earth could throw at him. A few random turns did not impress him. 30 seconds, Marcus announced. Get ready. Amy sat in the co-pilot seat, managing the shuttle systems and keeping the engines from exploding. She had already overridden 6 different safety protocols. 3 more were flashing warnings that she was choosing to interpret as suggestions rather than rules. We are going to hit them hard, Marcus said. I will match velocity as best I can, but expect some turbulence when we make contact. Some turbulence? Amy muttered. We are ramming a ship at combat speed. That is not turbulence, that is controlled suicide. Exactly, Marcus agreed cheerfully. Controlled. That is the important part. The shuttle slammed into the side of the Krath vessel with an impact that felt like hitting a wall at highway speeds. The magnetic clamps engaged, locking them in place. Immediately, Kyle and his team were moving. Nina fired up the plasma cutter and began burning through the Krath hull plating. Contact in the corridor beyond, Kyle said, checking his scanner. 4 hostiles heavily armed. Then we go through them, Nina replied simply. The hull plating gave way and the Marines poured through the breach. The Krath guards were waiting, their weapons ready. But they were in a narrow corridor with limited room to maneuver. The Marines had trained for exactly this kind of close-quarters combat. Kyle took point, his rifle spitting controlled bursts. The Krath guards were tough, their natural armor absorbing hits that would have killed most species. But the Marines kept firing, kept moving, kept pressing forward. Corporal Danny Chen flanked left, finding an angle around the Krath's cover. Private Luis Garcia provided suppressing fire from the breach point. Corporal Sarah Kim moved up with Kyle, her rifle barking in rhythm with his. Nina lobbed a flashbang grenade that disoriented the Krath guards for crucial seconds. The Marines did not hesitate. They advanced through the smoke and confusion, their training taking over. In close combat, humans had an advantage that most species lacked. They could function through pain, injury, and stress that would incapacitate others. Evolution on a death world had given them an incredible tolerance for things going wrong. One of the Krath guards caught Luis with a plasma bolt to the shoulder. The private went down with a scream but kept firing one-handed. Danny put 3 rounds through the guard's weapon arm, forcing it to drop its rifle. Sarah finished it with a burst to the head. Man down, Kyle called out. Nina, get Luis patched up. Everyone else, keep moving. They fought their way deeper into the ship, following the internal maps that Sophie had transmitted to their helmet displays. Every corridor was a battle, every door a potential ambush. But the Marines were relentless. They had been trained by instructors who believed that pain was weakness leaving the body, that exhaustion was just a suggestion, and that impossible was just a challenge. 3 weeks after the battle, Ambassador Velric stood before the Galactic Council in the Grand Chamber on Council Prime. The room was massive, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Today it was filled to capacity. Everyone wanted to hear what the Thenari ambassador had to say about the humans and what they had done. Velrix was a small creature by galactic standards, barely 4 feet tall with soft gray skin and large eyes that seemed to hold infinite sadness. His people had suffered terribly under Krath occupation, and the scars still showed. But today his voice was strong as he addressed the assembled representatives. For 3 months my people died, Velrix began, his words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. We sent messages to the council. We begged for help. We provided evidence of the atrocities being committed, and the council responded with discussions, committees, and strongly worded statements. He paused, letting the words sink in. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Krath burned 14 of our worlds. They killed millions. They enslaved our people. And still, the council talked. You formed diplomatic committees. You imposed economic sanctions that the Krath simply ignored. You sent peacekeeping vessels that were destroyed within an hour. And then you talk some more. Velrix turned to where Jake Morrison and Captain Helen Brooks stood in their formal dress uniforms. Behind them stood members of their crew, including Sergeant Kyle Peterson and his Marine team, all wearing their medals from the battle. Then we asked the humans for help. Velrix continued. The species you warned us about. The Deathworlders who come from a planet so hostile that most of you would die within hours of landing there. The violent primitives who barely qualify for council membership. We asked them because no one else would act. He gestured to a holographic display that showed the reconstruction efforts on Thenari worlds. Human engineers worked alongside Thenari civilians, rebuilding structures. Human medical teams treated the wounded. Human ships patrolled the space around Thenari colonies, making sure no one threatened them again. The humans did not debate. They did not form committees. They did not calculate the political cost or the economic impact. They simply came. 12 ships against 47. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting in unfamiliar territory. And they won. Admiral Richard Cole stepped forward. His uniform was crisp, his bearing military, but his eyes were tired. He had spent the past 3 weeks in diplomatic meetings, negotiating terms with the Krath Empire and coordinating relief efforts with the Thenari government. The Krath Empire has agreed to our terms, Cole said formally. They will withdraw from all Thenari systems immediately. They will pay reparations for the damage they caused. They will return all prisoners and stolen property. They will submit to council oversight of their military operations. And they have agreed that any future aggression toward council member species will result in immediate human military response. A representative from the Virex Federation rose from his seat. The Virex were an ancient species, one of the founding members of the council. They had always prided themselves on their peaceful nature and diplomatic skills. Admiral Cole, the council acknowledges the effectiveness of your intervention, the Virex said carefully. However, we must also express concern about the methods employed. The use of nuclear weapons in combat, the aggressive boarding actions, the willingness to engage in close combat rather than pursuing diplomatic solutions. These tactics make many species uncomfortable. Cole nodded slowly. I understand your concern. But let me be clear about something. We did not enjoy what we had to do. Humans are not mindless warmongers. We do not seek out conflict, but we also do not stand by when innocent people are being hurt. He gestured to the display showing Krath destruction. Your diplomatic solutions were not working. Every day you talked, more Thenari died. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to hit back. That is not a pleasant truth, but it is still truth. Helen Brooks added her voice. The council built a civilization based on the idea that everyone can be reasoned with. That is admirable. But it only works when everyone agrees to follow the same rules. The Krath did not agree. They took advantage of your reluctance to use force. They knew you would not fight back, so they kept pushing. She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species represented. Humanity comes from a world where we learned a hard lesson. Peace is not free. Someone has to be willing to defend it. For 10,000 years you have had peace because no one challenged you. But the galaxy is bigger than council space. There are species out there who do not share your values. And when they come, you need someone willing to stand between them and the people who cannot defend themselves. A council member from the Kiksari species stood. The Kiksari were scientists and philosophers, known for their logical approach to problems. Are you suggesting that violence is sometimes necessary? That contradicts the fundamental principles on which the council was founded. Jake Morrison stepped forward. He had been quiet until now, but he had spent years studying galactic politics and had something to say. With respect, violence has always been necessary, Jake said. You just had the luxury of not seeing it. Every peaceful society in history has been protected by someone willing to use force. Your council peacekeepers carried weapons even if they rarely used them. Your stations have security forces. Your laws have penalties. The threat of force has always been there, hidden beneath your diplomatic language. He pointed to the Krath representative, who sat silently in the corner. The Krath understood that. They knew you would not actually fight. They called your bluff and innocent people paid the price. Humans did not call a bluff. We made a promise and kept it. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species argued that humanity's methods were too aggressive. Others pointed out that the methods had worked when nothing else did. The debate raged for hours with no clear consensus. Finally, Velrix raised his hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, he spoke again. The council can debate philosophy all it wants, he said quietly. But I was there. I saw the Krath ships burning our cities. I heard the screams of my people as they were taken. I watched the council do nothing but talk. He walked over to stand beside the human delegation. Then I saw 12 human ships arrive. I watched them fight against impossible odds. I saw their pilots risk their lives to protect civilians. I saw their Marines board an enemy ship to rescue prisoners. knowing they might not survive. And I saw them win, not because they had better weapons or more ships, but because they refused to quit. Velrix turned to face the council directly. You can debate whether their methods were proper. You can express concern about their tactics. But know this, when my people needed help, only one species answered. And that species saved us. Whatever else you say about humans, remember that. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, the council chairman spoke. She was a member of the Zanari species, known for their wisdom and fairness. The council recognizes the service humanity has provided to the Thanari people, she said formally. We also acknowledge that our traditional approaches were insufficient in this situation. Moving forward, we propose the formation of a council defense force, with human military advisors helping to train and organize a proper response capability for future threats. She looked at Admiral Cole. We are asking humanity to teach us what we should have learned long ago. That peace must sometimes be defended with strength. Cole considered the offer. We will help, but understand that we will not change who we are. Humans fight to protect, not to conquer. We use violence as a last resort, not a first option. But when that last resort comes, we will not hesitate. If you want our help, you accept all of that. The chairman nodded. Agreed. The council welcomes humanity's full participation in galactic security matters. Later that evening, Jake sat in a quiet observation lounge on the council station with Sophie Grant and Danny Shaw. They watched the stars through the massive windows, each lost in their own thoughts. Do you think they understand what they are asking? Sophie wondered. Training a galaxy to fight. Teaching peaceful species how to use violence. That changes everything, Jake shrugged. Maybe, but they needed to change. The galaxy they built was beautiful, but it was fragile. The Krath proved that. All it took was one aggressive species to threaten the whole system. So what does that make us? Danny asked. The guard dogs of the galaxy? More like the older brother, Jake replied. The one who has been through hard times and knows how to handle bullies. We do not want to fight. But when the little kids on the block are getting picked on, someone has to step up. Back on Earth, news of the battle had spread across every network. Humanity had proven itself not just as survivors of a deadly world, but as protectors of those who could not protect themselves. Children played games where they pretended to be fighter pilots or Marines. Adults debated what it meant to be the galaxy's defenders, and governments began to consider what role humanity would play in the larger galactic community. In the Thanari home system, reconstruction continued. Human engineers taught Thanari workers how to build stronger structures. Human doctors shared medical techniques.